getting at it. I don't know what it is.
Let's go on.
Oh.
It's on discussion. Same base last time. Nothing's blinding.
Isn't it amazing? Yeah. No kidding.
I warmed your seat up. That's why I
Yeah, that's right.
coming first meeting in May, those are the time dates.
Assembly member stuff. Goodie bags? Are you on that? I've got a ton of stuff for not made up.
I haven't changed it great. Very original one. I'd much rather get those to a female.
Paying attention.
Just vote yes.
And you'll be good. You don't have to. Don't worry, you're pretty low.
All right.
Vote yes on everything?
Sure, why not? Everything. Sure, why not? Feel
Isn't that what you're doing?
Whatever works.
You're awful quiet.
It's over there.
Yes.
I'm a little dim.
Okay.
You're learning this.
They shouldn't send it back. They should never have made it to start. I mean, to order. Can the clerk call the roll?
Jay.
Here.
Kurt.
Here.
Cindy.
Here.
John Haverlick. Mark Johnson. Bob.
Here.
And Nancy.
Yes.
And now if you'll all stand for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We have the approval of regular meeting minutes from March 17th, 2014, special meeting minutes of March 21st, 2014, and April 1st, 2014, and the Board of Equalization minutes of April 2nd, 2014. Do I hear a motion?
Can we approve all of them at once? I'd move to approve all four. Second.
Nancy Strand moved and Bob Lynn seconded that we approve the minutes for all four meetings. And all those in favor?
Aye.
All those in favor, voice vote?
Sorry, that was individual.
Opposed? Motion carries. We move on to the amendment and approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Hearing none. Is there an approval of the meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Kurt moved and Jay seconded that we approve the meeting agenda. All those in favor, voice vote?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Nancy? Voice vote?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is public hearings and bid awards. We'll have a public hearing on ordinance 2014-02 and 2014-03, amending the zoning map for Service Area 1 to rezone lots 3 and 4 of Tract B of the Olson subdivision from single-family residential to commercial 2. A letter from Planning and Zoning Commission Chairman Susan Thomason has been provided explaining the Commission's desire to resolve long-standing issues for 2 single-family residential lots that are currently being used for light commercial activities. And I can read that letter. It says, "Dear Assembly members, as a member of Planning and Zoning, I would like to address the ordinance 2014-02, amending the official zoning map for Service Area 1 of Petersburg Borough to rezone several lots in the Olson subdivision. The Planning and Zoning Commission desired to resolve long-standing issues for 2 single-family residential lots currently being used for light commercial activities. The hope is a reasonable assessment of rezoning properties. Lots 3 and 4 on Arness Heights Drive in the Olson subdivision, parcels 1001596.03 and .04, be rezoned from single-family residential to commercial 2 with the requirement of an 8-foot fence on the street view. Ideally, the owners will create a buffer or transition zone from industrial use to single-family residential use. On December 10th, 2013, the Petersburg Planning and Zoning Commission discussed and voted unanimously to request a change in zoning for the above-mentioned 2 lots, which share 3 property lines with industrial use lots. Industrial lots bordering residential lots and the equipment, paraphernalia, and other gear renders these lots less desirable for their current zoning, single-family residential. Since the 1980s, not one lot bordering the industrial lots has been used for residential purposes due to the location and shared property lines bordering the industrial zoned lots. Planning and Zoning recommends consideration upholding the decision to rezone lots 3 and 4 in the Olson subdivision from single-family residential to commercial 2 in order to accommodate 2 working parties who contribute to our local economy and community for a healthy alliance of land use. Respectfully, Susan Thomason, Chairman, Planning and Zoning Commission." So is there any discussion on this item?
Yes.
And are we?
Yeah, this is a public hearing.
Yeah, if you can come up to the microphone and state your name.
My name is Joe Aliberti, and I own a lot on 126 Woodrow Wilson Drive, which is in that same subdivision. And I purchased the property in 2012. There's approximately 15 view lots on top of this hill up there. It's some of the nicer property to me. I've tried to buy it for quite a few years on the island as far as southern exposure and view. You see from my lot, you can see past Mountain Point and on down the Narrows. I think the main, well, one of the problems is that it's going to mess with the value of my property. If this creeps over and now you have a commercial 2 here and a commercial 2 here and 2 more lots above that and R1 right across the street, where it breaks now, there's a nice break. It breaks all the way up Hungerford, the backside. There's back of warehouses. I could design a really nice house that took care of that view and was 100 feet away from that property line and had a nice house and a place, you know, a residential lot. So I don't quite understand the reasoning. The only reason that I can see for this is that it is very advantageous to the people that want to do it because it's right next to them, and I understand that. They have a business, they do this the type of work that they do, but they filled this lot knowing that it was a residential lot. It's been a residential lot. It's been zoned a residential lot. They did it for a reason when they first did it. There's a good break there. If you start putting industrial or commercial along that side, then the lot across the street over here, nobody wants to build a house there either. And you can't make an effective buffer zone because I don't care how tall you build a fence, that goes uphill. All that property goes uphill from that lot. So if you have a 2-story house, I don't care how tall your trees are, you're still looking down. And if you plant alders, alders lose their leaves in the winter. So you're going to see it. It's something that you're going to see. It's not going to make this a residential area anymore. It's going to change the whole use of that property up on the hill. The reason I didn't make it to this first is I got on a conference call that day, and you had a meeting, and I was with some people. I was doing the bank down here, and we had a conference call with the security people and the CEO of the bank, and I was unable. I had every intention of coming to that first meeting and was unable to make it. Let's see. Also, I don't understand. Well, there's been a lot of violations of what you have told them that they could do with that property. Right now, the conditional use permit is way beyond what it should have been anyway. I mean, that they've just completely ignored what was set out to be a place where they could keep their gear. That's, if you have a residential lot, I can see storing your gear. And if you're going to live there, you're probably not going to have quite as much gear as if you don't live there. All that's happening with that lot now is it's just a storage. It's a residential lot that's being used for storage, and that's all it is. There's a lot of pots, a lot of equipment, a lot of and I don't know why in a residential area in the first place you would ever give a conditional use permit to somebody that wasn't planning on living there. If it's a residential area and you want to store your stuff or have your gear or your stuff, then fine, put it on your lot, you live there. But nobody's living in these lots. Why do we get a conditional use permit for something that is never ever intended to be a residential use of that lot? They got a conditional use permit, become a storage area, basically. So I guess in the comprehensive plan, this area was zoned residential for a reason. There is other industrial zone land available in the immediate area. Down in front of where there's a lot that in front of it, where Rockin' Road is now, there's a trailer, which is Richard's trailer. There's a driveway. There's industrial land right down below them. That whole bottom land is all industrial. There is lots up in this subdivision that there is some industrial up there. It doesn't connect to their property, but it's available. There's 3 lots that Mark Weaver still has up there that are industrial, and I did talk to him today. So I think the rationale for the change is only for the convenience of the petitioner. The land is adjacent to their industrial lot. I would hate to see a precedent set that any property owner can change the zoning of the adjacent lot regardless of the zoning for their specific use. Zoning areas are set up to avoid this type of puzzling of land use. And I purchased my land knowing the adjacent property or neighborhood was zoned residential. I don't know, I guess one of the biggest problems is, and there was a fellow that was going to buy one of these lots across the street from Arness Heights goes up here, empty lot, and then Rockin' Road. And then there's 2 lots right across the street on Arness Heights that are available that a fellow owns here in town. Well, there was another fellow that was interested in buying those lots, but he wanted, this is when this kind of started with me. Well, it actually started way before that when I asked what if that was residentially zoned, and it was, and that's why I bought the property. But he was interested in buying those 2 lots, but he says, I'm not going to buy them with all this stuff sitting here on these 2 lots. I don't want to live there. You see, it's a really good divider because you could build a house on that lot that we're talking about, 3 or 4. You've got almost 200 feet. So, I mean, if you're 20-foot setback and you build a 50-foot house and you turn it so the back of your house and your view is out this way, which is beautiful going down that way, you could make, it can all be residential. It doesn't, I don't see why, really I haven't heard a good reason why this needs to be done. So I guess that's what I got to say.
Thank you for your time.
You bet.
Is there anyone else?
My name is Jason Miller, and I'm here to address the Assembly. As a Petersburg Borough industrial, commercial, and residential property owner, I support the Planning Commission's recommendation to rezone Lot 3 and 4. I urge the Assembly to support, pass, and implement these recommendations as soon as possible to address the needs of these property owners, their businesses, their employees, and customers who rely on them. The thing that I thought was very interesting in telling what Joe brought up is he doesn't understand why this is needed. The actual property owners went through the formal process of actually asking for the recommendation through planning and zoning to rezone it, and so they are the ones who need it. So that answers the question, Joe. The property owners need it. That's what they asked for. The people who actually own the lots are requesting that this be done. So those are the actual owners of the property.
I talked to him today.
I'm talking about the actual owners of the property.
If we can keep it to the person at the microphone.
Yeah, okay. Anyways, that's my opinion of it. But as a property owner in this community who owns residential, commercial, and industrial, I like to see how the proactiveness of this planning commission is to understand the needs of the actual property owners. So if someone pertains that they're going to use the assumption that they may buy a piece of property because that may be existing there, then you can go through every single piece of property here and that argument can be made because this is a commercial fishing community, they store their gear there, and it may be residential, but they utilize it. So I think addressing this the way it needs to be done is exactly what they've done. And I don't understand the heartache from it. And I know, Joe, your argument, I get it, but you have additional industrial properties all around you outside of just those two lots. And I know you say it's residential, and currently it is, but the recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission has asked for it to be light commercial. And if I were to ever ask if I needed to have the Planning and Zoning make a recommendation on my behalf because there's something that I would like to do, I think it's wonderful that they listen to the property owners, at least the ones that actually own the property that they're dealing with. So that's my comments, and that's all I have to say. If there's any questions, I'm right here. Nope. Okay,
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else?
Yeah.
And if I might ask, if we can keep comments directed to the Assembly and pertinent
Okay.
to the discussion.
No problem. My name is Aaron Miller, the property owner of Lot 4. I would like to start out by replying to Joe's comment about how these lots aren't selling because of our stuff stored there being a nuisance to potential buyers. I'd like to point out that the lots that are all adjacent and bordering the industrial property that's already there, the warehouses, what have you, they haven't sold. They've been for sale for 10 years. We're the only two that bought those lots, whether it's convenience or whatever. That shouldn't really play into your decision whether or not we should have it rezoned. I have a speech written out here. Some of the best things about running a fishing operation in Petersburg is the support this community offers, be it processors, shipwrights, mechanics, electricians, harbors, etc. It is all right here. Where we come up short is on the gear storage end. None of us need to venture too far from our homes to identify a property zone violation of one kind or another. You know, ideally, living in a perfectly planned community, like what they're doing in China or whatever, brand new cities, no one would have to live next to a power skiff across the street or a gillnet cork line stretch across their neighborhoods, their neighbor's driveway, or a stack of crab pots obscuring their view as they drink their morning coffee. But Petersburg was not a planned community. This is not Scottsdale. It's not Palm Springs. Zoning violations are inherent here. They're going to happen. I believe the bottom line is that the gear we all see in this pretty little town, in pretty much everyone's neighborhood, is a very necessary part of Petersburg's economy. We simply can't have the jobs without the gear. Thankfully, we have a very practical planning and zoning commission in Petersburg, and violations and amendments are dealt with in a very practical manner and a public manner. As a matter of fact, the ordinance of our property's rezone was voted unanimously by this board. After much discussion and many public meetings, they decided commercial 2 was the best use for our property and in the public's best interest. I think that a no vote on this ordinance by the council would be an admission by them that the recommendations they received from the Planning and Zoning Commission on this matter has no merit. If this ordinance is struck down today, whose interest, I wonder, does it represent? We ask your support of the change in zoning. We feel that these conditions stipulated would be appropriate with this rezone. We are willing to give up our property for a 20-foot green belt on the east side of the property between RNS Heights Drive. We will plant alder and cottonwood trees, build an 8-foot wood fence around the north and east sides of our property, install a hinge gate for vehicle access, which will be kept shut at all times, only open to allow access. No rock crusher, asphalt plant, or cement plant placed in operation. This area will be used for light commercial use. The area would only be used intermittently. The vast majority of the time, there will be no activity occurring. We propose these conditions for our rezone request in an effort to find a practical win-win solution for this area. The reality is that a long-established area of industrial zone property lies immediately west of our Lot 4. A rezone request is also pending for Lot 3, immediately south of our parcel. However, the next parcel to the south of Lot 3, which is Lot 2, is already rezoned industrial. So Lot 3 and our Lot 4 are already borderline parcels. Our rezone request asks, in essence, that the boundary between the residential and more intense use zones in this area be moved from one side of these lots to the other. I think there's a map on your packet, page 63. There are 2 houses in the area that are on zoned residential. There are 2 more houses that are built on zoned commercial property. We feel that the zoning change would not have a detrimental impact on the surrounding properties. The existing uses of zoning in this area are comparably to nearby properties. Our land is abutted up to industrial land. We feel that its physical fits the area. We will take the steps to make this look right with the green belt and fence. There is a community need for commercial zoned land in Petersburg. Under the current zoning, there is no requirement for a fence, green belt, etc., along any of the boundaries of lots 3 or 4. Hence, if lots 3 and 4 remain zoned single-family residential, they will border directly on industrial properties with no buffer. If our conditional rezone is granted, the fence we propose and the green belt along the east boundary of our Lot 4 will establish an aesthetic and safety separation between residential and industrial zones in this area that doesn't now exist. We are trying to be reasonable and accommodating. We are willing to give up our property for this plan. It makes sense for us and the surrounding area. This is Petersburg, and we respect residential boundaries. However, there's an important need in Petersburg to support fishing and other commercial activities in close proximity to single-family homes. We are willing to take practical steps to preserve it. Currently, we pay around $300 in property tax. Our future plans are to build a warehouse on this piece of land that will increase the value of this lot probably substantially, probably in the couple $100,000 range, which would go directly to the city's coffers or the Bureau's coffers. I imagine it'd probably be in the thousands, maybe 3 or 4. The reason, versus $300 now, the reason we have not built a net shed and a fence is because we do not agree with the CUP. That's the conditional use permit. It's just not enough room for us to do what we need to do, especially to build a net shed. It doesn't make any sense right now with what we can use. I think I'm probably over the line right now with the little bit I got there. I've got plenty more gear to move up there. And my business is expanding, our business. We did not want to spend any more money on this lot until we could find a reasonable solution. I hope that you can consider this rezone. It makes more sense to have a green belt and an 8-foot fence than have nothing at all. And I don't think you could build a fence high enough there to obscure the view of the industrial lots. I think you could put a 16-foot fence up there, which would look ugly. And you still, on top of that hill, you're going to see the industrial warehouses. You're not going to get away from that. Thank you for your time and your service.
Aaron, why did you guys choose that lot? Was it enough?
Convenience.
Was there other opportunities there for you?
Convenience. It was next to my father-in-law's equipment, and it made it easy for me to move my gear with his equipment.
So was there other lots that you could have purchased
Yeah, there was. Yeah.
in the same proximity or?
Yeah, and if I, to tell you the truth, if I would have foreseen these problems, I would never have bought the lot. But once again, this is Petersburg. It's not Scottsdale. There's really nobody living up there, and they're all Tyvek wrap palaces where nobody lives, hardly ever. I mean, there's no activity. I can work all day up there and not see a single car pass by. It almost seems like it's a war of speculation to me, looking at it from a unbiased view. I think that's how I would interpret it right now. If I wasn't a property owner, I would say it's a bunch of speculators trying to make as much money as they can. I have no intention of selling the property. It's not going to sell anyways. We're probably the only interested party. Like I said, the adjacent properties next to the industrial lots, all in the line. I think probably the only ones that are interested in is possibly me. I don't think anybody else wants anything to do with it. A lot of fishermen have been looking for places to store their gear, and I know my brother-in-law has turned down people saying that you don't want that property. We're fighting over this stuff. That's not where you want to move your stuff.
One follow-up question.
So it's a war of speculators right now.
You know anything about the history of that subdivision? Has it been around since 1980?
Yeah, and I think in 1980, from what I've been told, is everybody got to pick what they wanted their property to be zoned on a map. Okay, what do you want? What do you want? And it's interesting, a lot of the complaints that are coming from these property owners they've built houses on industrial and commercial lots. To me, that's really interesting. It's almost like we got what we want. We don't really care what happens to you. It's the have and have-nots, I guess.
We have a number of folks for another issue on this agenda, so if that concludes your comments.
That does, yeah. I know you guys are really busy. And I guess that, reiterates my point about more property taxes. It sounds like you guys are having problems with funding the school or having to make cuts. This warehouse that we'll build here, if we get the rezone eventually, like everybody up there, eventually something will happen. But it's going to go directly to the city coffers, the additional property tax that the assessment will bring in.
All right, thank you.
I think that would help the community a
Yes.
lot.
Can you come up to the mic and state your name? And if we can try and keep it to about 3 minutes, because I have a feeling we're going to have a number of people testifying later on as well.
My name's Richard Burrell. I'm one of the property owners out there. And I just wanted to bring to your attention that, it seems like these lots are sacred, but there's no sewer and no water up there. And Joe Aliberti, he's got an illegal sewer system that runs down over the hill there. And it isn't up to city code or anything. There's no sewer and water in any of those streets. Tweed Olson, he's on some kind of sewer system, which I don't know. It isn't tied into any city sewer and water. And here we got people buying these lots, and they can't legally do anything. So I just wanted you to know that. And if they do sell them, and they put in a sewer system, it's going to be a cesspool up there. And the city has no money to put the sewer and the water in. Well, anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Everybody's looking down on me like I'm polluting or some damn thing, but I'm not. All I want is a parking place. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? If not, that concludes the public hearing on...
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Was there someone else? I'm sorry. Come right up.
There's a couple of them there.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Fry from the Petersburg Planning Commission, And as a member of the Planning Commission, we were attempting to resolve some longstanding issues with these lots. Our goal is to find a solution that was reasonable to all parties involved. And we had multiple meetings on this and asked, for what the concerns were, and we tried to address them. We had much deliberation on this topic, and we tried to find a solution that would work. We decided to grant not to grant the industrial zoning originally requested, because that would have just made things worse, not better. And we decided that the best solution was to go to the commercial 2 zoning, which allows for a legally enforceable screening law that's already on the books in Petersburg. And as well, the people who own the lots agreed to going into a legally binding covenants with their neighbors to provide the green belt and plant trees to address this problem. And we seemed that this would be the best solution, and it would address the concerns of people who were at the meetings. Before we voted at the last meeting, we said, does this address your concerns? And everybody said yes. So that's how we came to the solution that we did. And I just wanted to explain to you guys that we spent a long process in this. And we listened to the voices. We tried to come up with something that would work for everyone and be a reasonable solution. Thank you.
Susan Thomason, Chairman of the Planning and Zoning. I'd just like to add to Chris's comments that Pat Weaver was at several of our meetings over this topic, and they are the owners of lots 5 and 6 as you go up the hill on this particular side. And they also felt that this was a reasonable solution, and they are considering the possibility of, and I tried to get a hold of Pat, but I couldn't get a hold of her or Mark, the possibility of maybe applying for something similar, because as the landowners, they're not seeing property move as they anticipated, and they are open to points of discussion and other views. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Is there anyone else? Kathy, I'm going to defer to you. What's the... Yeah, come on up, Joe. And, yeah, I'm sorry. This gal's been waiting. I didn't realize that.
My name's April Miller, and Aaron's my son, and Jason's my son, and Katrina's my daughter-in-law, of course. I just wanted to say I'm very proud of them for coming forward and asking and going through the process. My husband and I are just buying another boat. We're going to need more storage. There's no storage anywhere for all the gear that boat's going to need. And if we want to do our business out of Petersburg, we're going to need that. And we've lived here all our lives. My kids have lived here all their lives. They're raising their children here, and they're going to be doing the same thing. I hope, if commercial fishing friendly. So I hope that you take that into account. And of course, the man that just spoke, that was on the planning and zoning, they've already done the work. I don't know why we're even here. I used to play with you, Nancy, down on all the gear.
My little sister.
Okay,
Point of
good.
order.
Your little sister, Laura. This is very difficult for me. I'm so glad my kids took speech and drama in school so that they can get up and speak publicly. This is something I can't do very well. But what I'm trying to say is we've all lived here. We all fish, or most of us fish, either sport fishing, commercial fishing. Everywhere I look, there's somebody's boat, gear, other kinds of gear, and that's fine. Do what you want in your own property. That's what I believe. I lived next door to people that had all kinds of stuff in there. But then I'm not moving, and I'm not speculating. to buy property to sell to someone from south that, I don't know why they would want to buy a piece of property like that and put a bunch of restrictions on it. I'm sure they're going to have a boat too and go out fishing or in the water and have all their gear laying around. So I think it's sad that these kids have to pay the buffer and all that, pay for a buffer and all that. It's really too bad, but that's what they agreed with the planning and zoning. And they've done their business. They've done the job. And I find this very hard to deal with, another board. So that's just my opinion.
Thank you for your comments.
This is not easy for me to do. I've known Richard and Sig for a long time, and it's a hard decision for me to make because I have a business too, and it would be convenient for me. You know, I can see exactly what it does for them. And I have had discussions with Richard and Sig both, and Richard and I are still able to talk to one another. Not that we're, you know, we've been able to sit down and discuss what this was all about. You know, Mark Weaver, I don't know why he hasn't sold that property up there. He wants to sell something. And so if he can't sell it as a residential lot, he wants to sell it as an industrial lot or whatever, however he can sell the piece of property up there. But I don't think that should be the driving force of what we want to do with that property. I mean, it's a really nice property up there. I don't know, there are some other availabilities to Richard, and I don't know, I don't want to be personal, but it's like below him, if John Murgis were to sell him a lot, it connects to his property. And he has a nice residential lot right over here where he could put a house, and he could tie that right into that whole bottom land there. John Murgis owns that whole, that's all industrial property down there. There's 3 more lots that are available from Mark Weaver up there around the corner. They're next to Tweet, and they go back towards the, and there's one industrial shop down there now that, I can't think of his name now, but anyway, that he owns. And I'm not doing this as speculation. I know that seems to come up. I'd like to live up there. I've liked that area for a long time. It may not be a big house that I build, but it's a house that I will live up there, and I'll spend my summers here, if nothing else. And I do have a dugout pad that's completely dug down to terra firma, which is about a 40 by 50 pad that a house can be built on. Whether I decide to build that house or not, I don't know. I have a 2-bedroom that's going to be up there now that I'm going to live in, though. So, and also, you know, if we start, it's the road use. If we start bringing all that stuff up there, those are not very wide roads, for one thing. They're not up to city specs. We start running equipment up there, and we're going to have that noise. I don't know. That's probably enough.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Please come up to the microphone. And if you could state your name.
Well, it's said, my name's Pete Litzheim, and it's said that, you know, change is always resisted, and some people want change, and we've had big changes here in the last little while. Change from a city to a borough. We looked out to all those people that lived in freedom and said, no, you're going to be part of our borough now. We voted on it. It wasn't an easy vote. There's still a lot of opinions floating about that, but we're a borough now, and people are paying taxes on any privately owned land. This issue of, you know, debate is expected. It's good. But the reality is there's need. And need supersedes want or desire. It's obvious to me that some people needed some property, they developed it. I hope you're abreast to the history here. How long has that been? How long have they owned that land? And how long has it been developed the way it is? And how long has it been used as it is? I think, you know, time does make a difference. And if they've had this land and been using it that way and nothing was done till, I don't know what actually caused it to come up, But they're standing their ground. They're saying, hey, we really need this land for this use. We've made huge changes here, haven't we? We're a borough now. We're taxing everything. So don't be afraid of change. I'm just encouraging you as a new assembly to consider this from a constructive, also beneficial standpoint to the city of Petersburg. I mean, it's been said that if it's going to bring in money, you know, that becomes a priority to the people who are collecting taxes. And so I own industrial land, a lot of it, and I own residential land, and I have residential land on the other side. And there's a ancient history there where somebody built a warehouse on residential land. And then, yeah, somebody else did. And then eventually somebody else did, right in tandem. It's still there. There was a debate, there was conversation, and I don't know what the city actually calls that land now, but those warehouses or shops are still all there. They border right against my industrial land. I guess I could say I just didn't enter the fray. I just said, whatever. If they need that, that's what they want to do with their land, good. But anyhow, I'm just here in support of the Millers and the Burrells to continue to be able to use their land as they purchased it for. And you know, to come 6, 7, 8 years later or whatever it's been and start bringing enforcement and change. I mean, the reality is the city was the authority at that time. The borough is the authority now. I just ask you, please consider, you know, this situation from where it really is. They own it. They're using it. It's beneficial to them. It's a need. Other people are, yeah, they own land up there now and they have different ideas and things like that. But anyhow, I said my piece. Thank you.
I think, Joe, I think twice is enough. We're getting into a tit for tat here, and I'd rather hear.
There was some history on that what he just mentioned, that this was how
I
it was
think
going
you
to
had your
begin with.
opportunity to present information twice, and we need to move
All
on.
right, okay, thanks.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak to this issue? Hearing none, we will conclude the public hearing on ordinances 2014-02 and 2014-03, amending the zoning map for Service Area 1 to rezone lots 3 and 4 of Tract B of the Olson subdivision from single-family residential to commercial 2. The next item on the agenda is visitors' views related to the agenda, and I am assuming there will be a few people that want to speak. Is there anyone who would like to talk to items related to the agenda? Sue Paulson, please stand.
Sure. And I think the agenda item I saw is about budgetary considerations. Would that be suitable? Hi there, Sue Paulson. Happy to have a chance to say a few words about the budgetary considerations for the upcoming cycle. And I'm here because I really oppose across-the-board budget reductions, as I had read about in the newspaper from the last meeting. And I so much appreciated the explanation offered by Superintendent Thomason in regard to the school budget and how considerable, thoughtful things have to take place before any kind of a absolute percentage cut should be taken on any budget. As we all know, this is a time of transition when it comes to the city of Petersburg becoming the Petersburg Borough. And there's going to be a big change in the tax base. And there will no doubt be discussions about what appropriate budget reserves in each area ought to be. And of course, I bow to you. You will be having these discussions. It's not going to be easy. But a general reduction in services right off the bat seems to me absolutely inappropriate at this time. Not justified by an inarticulated gesture to save money. Over the years, we've had many meetings of many sorts where we've talked about the importance of keeping up the infrastructure of Petersburg, making it attractive for young people to want to live here. And the same thing comes up again and again. We've got to have strong and powerful schools, and they do need adequate funding. And I could say, as a former employee, as a parent, as a citizen of the community, I certainly admire the school board's efforts to make an excellent school system, and not in a wasteful way of throwing the money down the drain. So I ask you please to consider accepting the school's request for this budget round and to refrain, if you would, from making across-the-board budget cuts in those percentages I was hearing when I read the newspaper article. And so, thank you very much. And I have to say, good luck and God bless you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
My name is Chris Fry. I'm here to voice my opinion of why it's a real disservice to the students of Petersburg School District to cut funding for the district at this time. As a father of 3 children in the district, it really concerns me. This year and over the next few years, the state has told the district to expect a reduction in funding. Reducing local funding further will also impact the district, resulting in a loss of or reduction of programs that are offered. Typically, when the district makes these cuts, the areas first to go are the areas outside the core academic classes. This unduly falls on the arts, music, and the vocational classes. Many of us would say that this is okay, as the goal is to get as many students to college as possible, and the arts and vocational classes are not as important. I feel this is very short-sighted. What are the students who don't want to attend college? What are the students who have an aptitude for art or music? Are we to shortchange him or her? And what of the student who does not want to attend college, or who wants to attend college but needs to be able to have a job to pay for it? These programs provide a more rounded graduate who is more employable right out of high school. I was fortunate in attending a high school that was forward-thinking enough to support the vocational training. And they actually offered classes in electronics. They funded this in partnership with local businesses and national businesses. And our lab was basically funded by Intel and Tektronix. I was able to leverage this training into a staff position when I was at college at PLU. And because of that, they paid a portion of my tuition. So I really think this is a good thing to have the vocational training for those students so they can go out and get that job. If anything, I feel the district should increase vocational offerings and partner with businesses to help fund these. This can be done by approaching local businesses and national businesses, many of which offer this kind of support and education. Cutting local funding will not allow them to pursue these options, but result in the loss of these programs altogether as state funding is reduced over the next few years. This would be a major disservice to the students of Petersburg. I understand it is a hard decision as to where to cut to balance the budget and keep the borough healthy. But education is not the place. We only get one chance to give these kids the education that they deserve. And reducing district funding further than what the state already has would have lasting impacts on their lives. Thank you for your consideration in this matter, and I urge you to vote in favor of maintaining the current funding.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Sarah Holmgren. I'm a PHS graduate, community member, school board member, and a parent of 1 school district graduate, 1 child in the system, and 1 that will be there in a few years. For the record, my husband, Randall Holmgren, who's also a borough employee, agrees with the following statement. Thank you for taking the time to allow us to speak. As you know, the school district, despite declining enrollment, has increased costs and services that we can't control. We've managed to have a balanced budget and still maintain our excellent and award-winning program. It appears the state will be giving us nearly $348,000 less next fall, which is why the suggested $200,000 hit from the borough would significantly impact our programs. Under the leadership of Dr. Thomason and Karen Quitzlin, we've been able to manage our declining enrollment and less revenue despite increased cost of services. In the last 7 years, while we were requested no raise from the borough or increased contribution, our garbage rates increased, our electricity rates increased, sewer and water followed suit. Unlike borough employees or any employees locally, the school district has not requested a raise in our salary. I doubt very much any employee would feel it's fair that we have not to have a raise over a 7-year period and to potentially have the same salary or less salary just because they have fewer members of their household now. Whether we have 430 students or 500, our expenses for insurance and utilities don't decrease with a decrease in enrollment. I ask you, for those of you who have raised children, was there a decrease in your house insurance costs once they went off to college or left the house? Was there a significant change in your garbage bill, your electric bill? Did the cost of paying for your mortgage change at all? I doubt it. I know for my fact my electrical bill, my sewer and water, all remained unchanged even with my daughter moving out of the house. My mortgage and homeowner's insurance did not change either, despite the fact that there was one less person living in the house. The school district faces that same scenario. With fewer kids, our expenses don't drastically change overnight. The light bill, the heat bill, the garbage bill, property and liability insurance bills still need to be paid whether there's 430 kids in our district or 500. A cut of $200,000 would mean we would be faced with drastic decisions on what we would need to eliminate. Do we eliminate sports, academic activities like the Tsunami Bowl, or eliminate teacher positions, which only means larger class sizes? If that potential solution would be, I want to remind you that some of our smaller class sizes have been one of the key ingredients to our academic success here. My father-in-law wrote his PhD dissertation on the correlation of small classroom sizes and student success. He wrote that in 1950. He was right then, and he's still right now. So please count me, myself, my husband, and our 20-year-old voting daughter as against the proposed cuts to the school district contribution. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Sarah. Oh, yeah.
Sarah?
Yes.
Sarah? I'm sorry, I don't mean to pick on you. It's
No,
just that
go
I-
ahead.
And I just want to kind of throw this as a general
Okay.
statement, is that, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think, as a community, I think we're going to have this conversation as to how are we going to be able to fund this $340-some thousand shortfall coming this next year. And I think that means that we're all going to have to dig into our pockets somehow, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands what this means, because we can't make money where there is no money to be made. So we have to find a new revenue stream. So I want everybody out here to be thinking about how are we going to, get that money so that we can fund the schools the way they should be funded. And I'm open for suggestions, and I'd love to have several town hall meetings to be able to discuss these ideas.
Well, I think you can look at those individually, but when the initial statement of let's do an across-the-board 1% cut is completely contrary to what you're, suggesting, is looking at things individually. And I think over the past 5 years, we have done a lot of that. I encourage all of you to look at our budget and find where we're spending in excess, where we are mismanaging funds, which as being a part of it for the last 6 years, I haven't seen it. And, you could argue, well, we don't need to travel as much. Well, we don't need to do this. Well, we don't need to do that. And, it may come down to that someday. But at this point, we're simply asking for status quo, the same as 7 years ago and the last 7 years. We haven't asked for an increase in funding despite having to, unless the borough would like to give us rebates on our garbage and our sewer and water because they continue, we keep continuing to get billed for that, must pay that bill. That keeps going up, but not the contribution to help us deal with that. And the fact that we have 15 kids in a class versus 20 in a classroom, those lights still have to be on for those 15 kids. So.
May I ask you a question? Mr. Thomason, after the meeting last time, made a point with me. Talk to us for a minute about the contracts that's been let for the fall in the coming year, and the obligations of which you're already under, and the sync of the budget, your budget versus this budget. Just for a minute, if you would, please.
His budget versus my budget?
No, the school budget versus our trying to do this. Mr. Thomason made a really good point of that.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
First off, Rob Thomason, Superintendent of Schools, for the record. The $300,000 shortfall has already been dealt with. We are not returning 3 teachers, 1 classified person. That almost gets to it, so we've dealt with that. Your question about the contracts is, by statute, we must let contracts by March 15th to tenured teachers. With the exception of a couple of teachers, everybody in our district, because of the longevity, is a tenured teacher. Therefore, we've let all the contracts out. If that,
Yes,
the clarification you needed? So the shortfall's been dealt with for now, so it's not like we'd have the 200,000 on top of the 300 we all dealt with when we were doing responsible planning. And then the contracts, if we were going to make additional reductions, we need to know a year in advance what the intention of the borough is. So, does that help?
Thank you. You helped. Yeah, helps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Ginger.
Ginger Evans. I am coming as a community member as well as a 19-year veteran at the school. Kind of on a whim, I moved to Petersburg. right after graduating, finished my student teaching in Anchorage, and I fell in love with the community because of the services Petersburg has, whether it be the library, whether it be Parks and Rec, what it has to offer, the clubs that I can envision my future children being involved in, the ability to walk down the street and see and know people by face and by name. I adore this community. I would not trade it for the world. And so when I hear about community services being cut, whether that's to the school, whether that is to the library, to Petersburg Mental Health Services, it is disturbing to me when there's not a long-term plan in place in the get-go. At the school district, in the 19 years I've been there, as a leader with the Associated Teacher of Petersburg, as a union president, we have negotiated responsibly. We have not shot for the moon when we've asked for increases in salary. And oftentimes our salary increases do not cover the increases in insurance. A couple of years ago, when we saw a shortfall that the district was going to have, we looked and went out for another insurance provider that would offer a cheaper insurance program for us as a staff. We voted as a staff to help with the district's budget and save the district almost $300,000 by switching insurance coverages. So we have done our homework to try to help as we have declining enrollment, we have decreased funding from the state, that we are looking at it. What can we do responsibly? Not only as teachers, how can we help with this issue, but also long-term for the district. What are the goals of the district? And that's to provide absolutely the best education possible for our students of our community. And I have to agree with what Aaron Miller said about the community of Petersburg as a whole, providing the infrastructure, the services necessary not only to provide for a strong commercial fishing fleet, but our Forest Service employees that work here, the local government, the people that have businesses in our community. That's important. If we want to attract other businesses to come to our community, those things are important. All of the community services that we provide are important when people start looking for jobs. And that's what makes Petersburg so special. And I would just like you to think long and hard, and I know we have some tough planning to do as far as long-term goals with a budget for the financial stability of our wonderful community, but just we need to take a long-term plan and look. And I think when some of these cuts came out at first, it's quite shocking when there hasn't been mention of any kind of cuts to any budgets, and then all of a sudden we've already made making our plans with the district, knowing personally what I've been involved with budget discussions, that we do long-term planning. And I would just ask the same of the Assembly. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, Liz.
Hi, Liz Woodyard from Petersburg Medical Center, and I don't have any children in the schools, but I feel really strongly that the hospital is part of the infrastructure of the community too. So just to comment, I am in support 100% for keeping all the community services that are funded. Our hospital had a survey a couple weeks ago. We had a stellar survey for care. We did have some findings for the building being in disrepair, and just like a hospital, the library, the schools, mental health, the museum, they're all important to bringing people to Petersburg and keeping people here. So I would support personally with more tax, to pay more tax because I think the services are worth it, or tobacco tax or an alcohol tax. Personally, I would, because I feel it's very important and I feel the taxes are pretty reasonable here. So that's what I would do personally.
Thank you. Yes, please.
My name is Matt Pollock. In case you can't tell by my attire, I was not planning on speaking here today, but here we go anyway. I am also a graduate of PHS. My wife is a graduate of PHS in '95. I'm a coach of the high school JV basketball team, middle school basketball team, helping out with baseball as well. I work as a software developer from my house. My wife stays home. We could literally live anywhere in the world and I could still do my job the way I do, and we've chosen to come back to Petersburg, and the school system is a huge reason why. I was able to, receive a good enough education here to attend Stanford University. It's served me very well in my secondary education. I played on the basketball team. I did not take the shop classes and things like that, and I regret it immensely. If I could go back, I would. I took all the academic stuff because I thought that's what I needed to get into Stanford, and from then on, I've regretted not taking shop. So when I hear that, things like that may be in danger, it bothers me, even though I did not participate in those kind of classes as a student. I see how important the extracurricular activities are to the kids here in town. A town our size, with the weather we have, there's not a whole lot to do if you're not involved in extracurricular activities. There's a lot to do, but nothing that's worth doing or that we want our kids to be doing. I just want to voice my support to keep the funding the way it is currently. As a father of a daughter who's in second grade, a son who's in kindergarten, and another daughter who will be in the school system here eventually, I am immensely appreciative of the teachers that we have. I work closely with some of the teachers as a coach, things like that. They do a heck of a job. I know, my sister's on school board, so I follow things a little more closely than others might. And I encourage you as well to look at the budget, find out where we're wasting money, because I just don't see it happening. I think everything that we put into our kids is a very good investment. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Karen?
I'm Karen Christensen. I wasn't able to be at the last meeting, so this is just a short testimony now. I'm here as the parent of a student in the school system and another student entering in coming years. And I'm also here as a longtime member of the Petersburg Mental Health Board. And first of all, I wanted to recognize the time and energy that the mayor, city manager, finance director, and each assembly person has put into the budget and dedicated to these budget discussions. It is appreciated. It's a lot of time. I agree that effort should be made to remain fiscally responsible now in order to better prepare for potential funding shortfalls in the future. But I would argue that our future is here already. It's now. The proposed funding cuts to the school will affect programs that help to ensure a brighter and more diversified future for the students, and they affect activities that keep their bodies and minds active. The borough's monetary support toward Petersburg mental health is critical in maintaining grant funding for local behavioral health services, and if help is received now, it can potentially minimize the need for emergency services in the future. And I urge the Assembly, finally, just to vote in favor of keeping those important, what I consider preventative programs in place. So, thanks for your time.
Anyone else? Yes.
My name is John Bringhurst, citizen of the community. I feel a little awkward here. I having been the administrator of the hospital for almost 14 years and now on the school board, I feel like I have a foot in each camp there. I've also had a close association with Petersburg Mental Health through my association on the hospital, and feel like I have a foot in that camp as well. I guess what I have to offer is not a whole lot here, but having been a hospital administrator for 40 years, I can't imagine a more complex organization than that. It's just extremely complex. The funding of it is something that's overwhelming to those of us who've been familiar with that operation. This is my second term as a school board member here and in another community, and I'm also very familiar with the complexity of school board issues as well, and the difficulties in terms of the regulations that are imposed upon us and our challenges in terms of meeting the funding requirements for that as well. I guess my request of the Assembly is that, given the complexity of this issue, that you give some careful attention to what the resolve ought to be here. What I've heard in terms of an across-the-board cut sounds almost to me like a knee-jerk reaction to a very complex problem, and I would hope that the Assembly would take the time to consider these organizations, what their benefits and contributions are to the community, and to help find an appropriate resolve for that. I'm sure there are talented people in all of these issues who'd be very happy to help with whatever solution we could come up with for that. But I do believe it requires a fair amount of study and determination by the Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
I don't know if, my name is Savan Guthrie, and I'm representing the Retail Committee of the Chamber of Commerce. I don't know if you'd like me to give my comments now or wait till we get to Agenda Item E under New Business.
If you wish to give them now, you certainly can.
I think after what I've just heard, I'd like to wait until we get to the actual thing. I always come to the wrong meeting.
All right, we'll hear from you later, Savan. Is there anyone else? Yes.
Hi, my name's Kari Beckland, and I also didn't prepare anything today. I hadn't planned on coming. Most of the parents that I've seen earlier at preschool today and friends of mine that are young parents downtown are talking about these cuts that have come out of nowhere, and it's pretty concerning. So I just want to say that as a mother of a second grader and one of the 33 kindergartners going into school this next year, I hope that you can vote in favor of keeping things the way they are if at all possible. And I really appreciate all the work that you do. Thank you.
Anyone else? Then let's move on to visitors' views unrelated to the agenda. Is there anyone that wants to speak to issues that are not on the agenda? Hearing none, I'm going to call a 5-minute break. We've been running for over an hour now, and then we'll get back to board, commission, and committee reports.
Need a louder hammer.
I know.
There you
go. The meeting is back in session. The next item on the agenda is board, commission, and committee reports. And at this time, we have none. And the next agenda item after that is consent agenda, and we do not have one. The next item is report of other officers. We haven't received any, but are there any reports? Hearing none, we'll move on to the mayor's report. We also do not have a mayor's report, so we'll move on to the manager's report, and there is one.
Thank you, Cindy. Chief Swihart and Mayor Jensen testified before the Alaska Senate on need for our building project to remodel this building, and we will know hopefully later this week if we get anything out of that. Also, the chief is scheduled and it's been redone, changed to talk about some of the drug trends in southeast Alaska, but he's been asked to testify on that. Work has begun on the Rasmussen Bridge. We've closed the bridge to through traffic, and we'll try to continue to work with the neighbors over there and the businesses to try to do what we can, although there are going to be times that's going to be difficult. The goal is to have that done before Mayfest. Streets crew are doing sweeping and washing streets, although maybe Mother Nature will help us out here a little bit. we're trying to do that from 6 to 8 a.m. daily. But it's the same kind of crew in some sense that's also doing the work on the bridge. So we're bouncing them back and forth based on our ability to do that. We have scheduled a big-time cleanup of Main Street and painting of the crosswalks before Mayfest as well to make sure that happens. We had a little bit of a, scare/issue up at Mountain View Manor. We had a main water line to the facility break. Public Works will continue working with the Manor to come up with a plan to basically replace that water line. The hope is to do that early this summer based on other work priorities, unless it does not last as well as we hope it is and we have to go in earlier. Water Department, there's some new state regulations that are coming through on the water that comes off the backwash that we do when we clean the filters and how we get rid of that. The new permit process is out for public comment at the moment. May have to be in place by midsummer. This will cost us some money. It'll add to our costs related to additional testing and could result in some capital project needs at the water plant to change how we treat the backwash water before it's discharged into City Creek. New recycling program continues to be grow and be a success. We have a current customer count at 952 overall recycling customers, residential and commercial. So big challenge now with that is not just as much number of customers, but volume. As Carl has reported, we want to try to get that recycling number up to near 40%. And it's very doable, but we got to convince everybody and do some public outreaches on information. The new recycling collection contractor, Ruger's Trucking, started service on April 1st. And big thank you out to Petersburg Indian Association for their past work in providing that service for the community as we learned more and more about what we can do. Couldn't have been done without them, and just again thanking them for their help. Rock and Road may restart the work up at the landfill. This goes back to the North Harbor dredge project where we were using the dredge spoils to kind of smooth out some of the facilities up there and stabilize the slope around the metals pile. We're hoping that they can get back up there by mid-April. Weather like this may change some of that, but it's important for us to have that graded just properly so we don't have any issues with water or materials coming off the slopes. The annual Household Hazardous Waste event has been scheduled for the weekend of May 31st and June 1st. Please, everybody, take advantage of that. It's a great way to get rid of stuff that you may not have an otherwise way to get rid of, and you definitely don't want to be pouring it down the sewer. That cost us all money. We have installed a new visitor log up at the Blind Slough Hydro Trailhead. This is in response to some new federal requirements from FERC related to documenting that facilities are also used to enhance any recreational amenities within the project boundaries. So Joe's group will have to turn that log over to them on various occasions and show that there are visitors up there using trails in the facility. Power and Light's also working with Alaska DOT on the Haugen Drive project for new crosswalk lighting, and we'll have to move some poles that are in conflict with the new sidewalks and or the bike path. Bike path being a big key issue because at this point there's no funding, but we're hoping down the road maybe that can change. Parks and Rec has been working with some local runners to establish interest in a half marathon event. So for those of you that like to run a long ways, talk to Donnie. We have new this year in Parks and Rec a girls-only basketball program. We have 24 young women participating, so congratulations to them. We are signing up youth for our lifeguarding classes coming up this month, and we're also looking for new lifeguards to hire in the near future to keep the facility at full staff. Sandy continues to coordinate with the Southeast Regional EMS regarding having the EMS Symposium here in Petersburg. It's currently scheduled from April 10th through the 13th, so we'll have some folks come into town to practice their skills and learn from each other, and hopefully some of our local vendors can make some money on She's also working on completing a study that I've asked her to do on the current ambulance rates and expenses, so we have a better idea on the cost of that program and are our rates set appropriately. We have not, to my knowledge, not adjusted the rates in 5, 6, 7 years, something like that, Sandy?
More like 10.
Thank you. So it is something, it's time to look at them. We had 3 search and rescue personnel attend the Managing Lost Person Incident training in Talkeetna. 1 traveled from Petersburg and 2 were already in Anchorage, so it made it easy. And Susan Christensen, many of you know her, she is our mapping coordinator, continues to be our mapping coordinator, even though she doesn't live here with us anymore. We have set her up in her new place in Seattle to work remotely. Her skill set was such that we really couldn't do without it, especially during the Borough transition when we were remapping everything. And so she is currently telecommuting for us and will continue to do so for the near term to get us through the Borough transition, get all of our maps up to date, and continue meeting the Borough's needs. Kind of the fun part about it is she can print stuff there in her place in Seattle, and it shows up on our printers here. So makes it technology makes it really nice. And the U.S. Forest Service Resource Advisory Committee, or the RAC Committee, for those of you who are more familiar with that, has scheduled meetings for May 9th, June 6th, and July 19th. I believe they are looking for people to serve on that board. Am I correct, Leo? Correct. As they've gone through some changes on who can and can't be renewed on the board. This is important. This is money that comes from the Secure Rural Schools timber receipts. It is then allocated in our region and can be used for trails and various outdoor type stuff in this area. We're looking at about $176,000 that this committee would be able to allocate here locally. Possibly more. We're waiting for the final report from the feds and then the pass through to us, or from the feds to the state and then the pass through to us through the RAC group. And all of the Petersburg members' terms end in October, so we will be looking for folks who may want to serve on that board.
How many people?
Leo, how many folks on that board from Petersburg?
3 groups of 6.
So, thank you. And that's it, unless there's questions for me.
I do have one question for you. I drove past Skate of Gear at Keto's Cave the other day and then came to the sign that said, "You can't go that way," and wasn't quite sure what to do. And I wondered if you had any suggestions, Carl. If we maybe could do some additional signage there to make it clear whether folks can turn left there or need to turn around at that intersection and head back out.
What location was that again?
Right, we're on Singley Alley. When you come
Oh.
past Keto's, you're stuck there because of the
Absolutely,
construction.
yes. We'll make that clear. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
I have a question for Carl. On the water treatment plant, are you thinking now that we can get by with what we have with some additional testing, or do you think we're going to have to go and change the facility some?
It will completely depend on the testing that we do. We're going to be required to do additional testing, which is in the current budget for next year. The results of that testing are what might push us towards a capital project in the future.
Okay, so if we don't meet we don't meet the threshold requirements, and you're thinking it'll kick us over?
Right, yes.
All right, moving on. I'm sorry. You gotta
I'm sorry.
shake me apparently
I mentioned
today.
3 groups of 6 for the RAC. That's Petersburg, Cake, and Wrangell, so all
Okay.
18 wouldn't have to come to Petersburg. Thank you.
So locally, just 6.
6 or so.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Moving on to unfinished business, we have an ordinance for second reading. Ordinance 1402, an ordinance amending the official zoning map for Service Area 1 of the Petersburg Borough to rezone Lot 3 of the subdivision of Tract B of the Olson subdivision from single-family residential to commercial 2 with special limitations. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
What is the motion?
The motion is to is to amend the official zoning map for Service Area 1 in Petersburg to rezone lots 3 and subdivision, tract B of Olson subdivision from single-family residence to commercial 2, with special limitations.
It's been moved by Kurt and seconded by Bob to amend the zoning to amend the zoning map and change the designation from single-family residential to commercial 2 with special limitations. Is there any discussion?
I still can't support this. It was residential when they bought them. It creeps it over so that all the arguments about it becoming a buffer don't seem reasonable to me, because there will be residential across the street that will be now next to the spread of this. So I'm afraid I can't support it.
Jay, did you have a comment?
I did, thank you. I think really valid points are raised on both sides of this one. I've heard as much about this particular issue as any other one over the course of the last week, and there's been a lot of discussion in the community, so it's been a lot. And one of the primary concerns that I've heard from the community about this is now setting a precedent, meaning, what's to say I buy a residential lot on Haugen, et cetera, and want to, and it suddenly becomes industrial. I hear that, but I think that is what the planning and zoning is for. And then later on the assembly, I think it is a case-by-case one. And in the case of this one, I am going to vote for it. And not easily. I've wrestled with this one more than the other issues on the topic. I don't necessarily know if there is a right or a wrong. I hear Mr. Aliberti's points. I hear Mr. Burrell's, et cetera's points. But in this case, I'm going to support it because I think, in the big picture, I don't believe it sets a bad or a dangerous precedent for the future. That's all.
Any more discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
No.
Cindy?
No.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
No.
Fails.
Moving on to ordinance 2014-03, an ordinance amending the official zoning map for Service Area 1 of the Petersburg Borough to rezone Lot 4 of the subdivision of Tract B of the Olson subdivision from single-family residential to commercial 2 with special limitations. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Kurt moved and Jay seconded to amend the zoning for Lot 4. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob?
No.
Cindy?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Nancy?
No.
And Kurt?
Yes.
Fails.
So lots 3 and 4 will not be rezoned. Moving on to item C, fiscal year 2014-2015 budget considerations. This agenda item has been scheduled for both meetings in April to provide opportunity for assembly members to further discuss and consider the items. Is there any motion at this time on the budget?
So moved.
Can you state your motion?
The motion would be to consider the 2014 and 2015 budget.
In what way?
Should I just read it again? This agenda item has been scheduled for both meetings in April and provide opportunity for assembly members to further discuss and consider the 2014-2015 budget items.
What would you like to have happen with the budget, Kurt?
That we adopt the budget.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you for keep the prodding. Keep the prodding. I'll get it out there. Okay, adopt it.
Is there a second? Kurt moved and Nancy seconded that we adopt the budget presented by the borough manager for the 2014-2015 fiscal year. Is there any discussion?
If I may.
Yes.
Just so it's clear, this is not an official budget ordinance approval here. This still has to be read 3 times starting in the first meeting in May, followed by the public hearing and second meeting in May, final approval, the first meeting in June. So this was just put on here to allow assembly members to make any additional changes to this budget prior to getting to that point. So approval here is not the first step in the budget, but tell staff we're not going to do much more to this.
To get consensus.
Yes, ma'am.
So I wanted to preface any discussion with a couple items that I'd had a conversation with Steve, asking some additional questions about the budget that I wanted to share both with the assembly members and the public. In much of the conversation about the budget has centered around the amount of money we have in reserves and for emergencies. Currently, we have over $20 million in reserves. That money is being invested, and it is held in reserve for emergencies. In some cases, it's depreciation funds that are allocated to different departments. Though it is allocated to different departments, the Assembly does have the ability to move that money between projects and functions if the need arose. The fund has increased over the last 3 to 4 years by $300,000 to $400,000 every year. Now, it makes sense to keep that money in reserve. I'm not saying that we should get rid of it, but just to let you know that there is money available. There is currently a $3.9 million reserve in the general fund. By policy, but not by municipal code, we wish to keep $3 to $4.5 million in reserve. So in essence, we're only $500,000 away from our maximum that we have set in policy we will keep in reserve. A budget cut of 1% off the top, which was proposed at the last meeting, equals $256,000 and is equivalent to 4 jobs. This doesn't include the costs that might be levied by the state if those positions are PERS positions. We would be required to pay a penalty to the state in that instance. So, just wanted to share that information with you. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, Mayor, if I may. Going back to last week and the robust budget discussion that was going on and hearing sense then from members of the community. First off, I'm glad that everyone has spoke as much as they have. It's important. Speaking for myself, it's important to have these discussions now as opposed to the first week in May when we sit down to be having the first official reading of this budget. Frankly speaking, I think the last week, including the meeting, was good democracy. It's good to hear where people were at. Good to hear what's important to members of the community. Important to hear consequences of decisions we make. Talking about the budget being tentatively approved for the first meeting in May, I'm in full support of that. I think something I'd really like to see moving forward, Kurt, you touched very briefly on it earlier, the idea of having, whether it be town hall meetings or some other way in terms of how to address future needs. I know we've talked about trying to increase money set aside for depreciation. I think that is important. There's a lot of expensive items in this community that we want to keep and maintain. I think having community-wide discussions about how to appropriately do that is going to be really important moving forward. And I guess my approval of the 14-15 budget is in a strong hope that being proactive, thinking 2015, 2016, we can be really ahead of the game so that we can proactively plan for those savings, potentially with what Member Wohlhuter had mentioned, with getting large-scale community input and how to do that. It's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Paul.
If I can. I like you, I like the fact that, folks have talked about their concerns and their needs. I really do like that. Mr. Thomason made a really good point with me at the last meeting about the fact that our budget is on a different schedule than is the school's budget. And it really makes it hard, because his is first and ours is second, really makes it hard to make any adjustments. And he came home loud and clear on that one. So at this point in time, it doesn't make much, I think it's wrong for us to make a change, and I wouldn't support any change to the school budget for the coming year. I do think, looking at the crystal ball, and I've had quite a number of telephone calls on both sides of the issue, actually. I'll say that I had a young woman talk to me this morning, said that she was holding down 2 jobs in order to make ends meet. And she says, whatever you do, she says, don't raise taxes. You know, and I'm just saying that on the other side of the coin. And I think we are going to have to take a look at how we're going to continue to make ends meet I was shocked when Joe Nelson told us that, I think 2 meetings ago, that it costs $1 million for a transformer in this town. I had no idea. If you'd asked me, I'd have said 100,000 at the most. And I talked with Carl. He had me over looking over the water and stuff, and I was shocked at the price of some of what it's costing us to maintain just treated water in the town here. I mean, and I'm saying we have to do that. I agree with that. But, you know, we're going to have to make some choices, I say, down the road, because we've been told that we are going to get reduced state funding, we're going to get reduced federal funding. And I agree with some idea of town hall meetings, and I agree with the ideas involving the public. Exactly how we do that, I don't know. But if you folks certainly have ideas, we're certainly willing to listen, because we don't have all the crystal ball. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Any other discussion? Will the clerk call a roll?
Cindy?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
And Bob?
Yes.
Motion passes to support the budget as presented to the Assembly.
If I may just make it, that includes the school funding and...
Yes. Now get back to work.
Good call.
The next item on the agenda is the Juneau appeal of the Petersburg Borough boundaries. Juneau has filed its appeal with the Supreme Court of the Superior's Court affirmation of the Petersburg Borough boundaries. Petersburg attorneys will be filing any and all necessary responses in a timely manner.
I can just speak in general. Spoke to Jim Brennan. We were, unhappy that Juneau has chosen to do this, but it's not unexpected. Actually, it costs less to appeal it in Alaska to the Supreme Court than it does to make the Superior Court case. So I suppose in Juneau's case, it was not a huge stretch to think they would just go ahead and spend the extra money to try to fight this one last time. But don't have a time frame yet. Juneau has filed their appeal. We will file a responsive brief to that along with the local boundary commission, and Juneau will then be allowed a chance to add to the story a little bit, and then it'll be scheduled before the Alaska Supreme Court at some point, and we'll keep the Assembly informed.
And we don't have any idea what that time frame might be?
No. We're continuing to push because, the longer this goes on, the harder it will be for us to back up. And we're doing a lot of work on this, ordinances as well as mapping and everything else related to the borough formation. So, but that's kind of we just don't know when it'll happen yet.
All right. Moving on to new business. The next item on the agenda is Ordinance 1406, an ordinance providing for Chapter 4.50 E9911 Emergency Communications Fund of the Municipal Code and updating current language to reflect borough incorporation. This is the first reading of the ordinance. The ordinance provides for an enhanced 911 system on a borough-wide basis and provides for the continued imposition, collection, and remittance of an E911 surcharge.
So move to adopt.
Second.
Kurt Wallhuter moves and Jay Stanton Gregor seconds to adopt the ordinance. Is there any discussion?
I have a question. Is this charge on each line that comes into the house or each number?
I can speak to that. Sort of. This is a charge that is charged currently on every phone number that exists throughout the borough. Chief Swihart actually fixed a problem when he recognized it, that on cell phones often it was being collected and then sent to the wrong community. wasn't being sent here. So AT&T, for example, Juneau was getting the revenue from it. We have corrected that, which is doubled, or Kelly, what was our increase?
I think we were between 400 and 500 subscribers on the books, and there were actually around 1,700 to 1,800.
So we've corrected that, and that money is restricted in the sense that it only can be used for infrastructure and operations related to the E911 system. In the event, to be a full disclosure, what we're asking you to approve is just the ordinance. There's not a rate in there. We're currently charging $1 per line. We are expecting to come back to the Assembly and request that be raised to the state maximum, which is $2 per line. The justification, and the chief will come in and give you more information at that point. That's not what you're voting on here. But the reason for that is we'd like to use the proceeds from that to help towards the police building. A big part of the expense is the over $500,000 at this point in communications equipment related to making sure that we hit all of the standards we're supposed to, the radio system and the communication system, and the workstations, which are very specialized, that involve E911. So again, that's not in front of you today, but our expectation is to come back to the Assembly and request that once the ordinance is approved for 3 readings.
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor, can I ask Steve a question? Is that per month, Steve?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so
per month, yes.
Okay, 2 questions, Steve. Once the system's in place there, is your thinking that we go back and take a look at the effectiveness of it after some period of time of what we're doing?
As far as how the money's being used, or
no, how the system's operating and how the money's being used.
yeah, it's something. I mean, I take my direction on this one from the police chief as well as the fire group, because we're dispatching for Forest Service and the troopers and fire and EMS. So how well the system works, we hear from a lot of different people. Okay. The enhanced E911 is about location. Is when you call in, can we find you? It is really to take it down. It's also all of the equipment associated with that. Built into this budget we talked about previously, we've got 80-something thousand. It's just basically a lot of fixing some repeater issues and fixing some portable radio issues where we were putting a lot of our staff out there with radios that weren't working. So this is kind of an ongoing thing. By the way, the E911 surcharge can be used to fix some of those things. So it's a source of money. We've got it in our minds anyway, kind of earmarked to help us with the building project to try to, get some of that big piece of that paid for. And in a perfect world, we would have been charging this for a while. We would have had built up a bit of a war chest, and when we needed to spend this money, we would have had it in hand. That was not the case. Thanks to the chief for spotting the one problem. The other is the cost.
My second question is, I thought when I read the ordinance, it did automatically go to $2. So I read that incorrectly.
We checked with Kathy. Am I correct, Kathy? That at this point it does not change the rate?
No, it says you're going to set them either by ordinance or resolution. But I'd have to read through it again myself, but I haven't.
I believe it said up to $2. It set a cap at 2.
So we were, until we knew if you were going to approve the ordinance, we didn't ring in the rate piece of it. But that's a one reading resolution we can bring. So my plan was the 3rd reading of this, if this keeps passing, is we'll give you a resolution and we'll ask for the Assembly's support.
So that the public understands, we're talking about $2 to every telephone that's in the borough.
Currently charged
Or
$1.
Up to $2, yes.
So it'd be a $1 increase, correct?
Is there any more discussion? Will the clerk call a roll?
Kurt.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
And Cindy.
Yes. Ordinance passes. The next ordinance is ordinance 2014-07, an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2014 budget for known changes. This ordinance is in its first reading. The ordinance provides for recycling revenue for scrap metals in the amount of $79,653.04, and an added expense of $20,100 for the curbside recycling collection. And that's due to the new contract.
And this is for the current year budget, not next year's, just to be clear. This is a supplemental budget item.
I move to approve ordinance 1407.
Second.
It's been moved by Nay. I'm determined to mess up your name, Jay. It's been moved by Jay and seconded by Nancy to approve ordinance 1407. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay.
Yes.
Kurt.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
And Cindy.
Yes. And ordinance 2014-07 passes on its first reading. The next item on the agenda is Resolution 2014-04, a resolution designating departments and their functions that must comply with HIPAA, which is the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. The resolution declares that the Petersburg Borough is a hybrid entity of HIPAA and designates that 3 borough departments and their functions are most subject to the Act. Those departments are Mountain View Manor, Administration, and the EMS Division of the Fire Department. Do I hear a motion to accept this?
Second.
Kurt Walhuter moves and Nancy Strand seconds to adopt Resolution 2014-04. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Bob.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Kurt.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes. And Resolution 2014-04 passes. Moving on to Resolution 2014-05, a resolution amending the participation agreement with the Public Employees Retirement System. This is a housekeeping resolution acknowledging borough formation and assigning borough administrative personnel who can execute necessary documents and administrative tasks of the agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Jay moved and Bob seconded to adopt Resolution 2014-05. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay.
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
And Kurt.
Yes.
Resolution 2014-05 passes. Moving on to a resolution declaring Saturday, May 3rd, 2014 as a sales tax-free day in the Petersburg Borough.
So moved to adopt.
Second.
Kurt Walhuter moves and Jay Stanton Gregor seconds. Resolution 2014-06. Is there any discussion?
Yes. No, go ahead, Kurt.
Well, I was just going to say, I want to hear from the person that was going to, Savannah, who was going to talk earlier, about the reason for May 3rd.
Read my mind. That's what I was going to say.
Come on up, Savannah.
Well, thanks for giving me a moment of your time to discuss that. The reason for May 3rd is we always aim for a spring date and we always aim for a fall date. I think as kind of, I actually don't think it says that in the ordinance. I think it says just 2 tax-free days to be decided by the Borough Assembly. The reason we pick May 3rd is that there are funds flowing again somewhat in our community after having crabbing and herring pounding going on. It is before our tourism hits, which is about Mayfest, kicks that off. So it's a time that we can encourage our community members to get out and shop. They hopefully have a little extra money to do so. And we are not extending that sale into others besides our local community members. Is that any other questions or clarification?
Does anybody else have questions of Savannah? Thank you.
Okay,
very
thank
much.
you.
Is there any more discussion?
I'm not sure we can afford this. I'm not sure we can afford it. I see all the letters of support, and they say it's a great way for merchants to offer a deal to they could offer a 6% sale anytime. And I'm questioning whether it should always be on the back of the borough that the sale happens.
Did you have a comment?
I did. I've heard a lot from the community about this particular issue, mainly small business owners in the downtown. Those small business owners are local Petersburg residents. Speaking with them, a lot of them use some of the art galleries as an example. If myself or any other member of the community goes in there and spends $500 on a piece of art, for instance, not paying sales tax on it on that day. However, that small business owner who is a resident of Petersburg, those dollars aren't leaving Petersburg. They're going to spend that on groceries later on, etc., etc. Meaning, I don't see, especially given the timing Ms. Guthrie has presented, a time when it's generally more of a local population, at that time using May 3rd as an example. Short term, we're going to be losing out on revenue that day. Long term, these people and that discretionary money, I think, is reinvested in the community and the long-term coffers. I don't think there's a significant negative impact involved with that, and I want to be clear, I'm in full support of the sales tax day on May 3rd because I think it's actually good for the local economy as opposed to bad. It's my 2 cents.
And I would just add, in talking to other communities, I have to say I was not in favor of this initially when it was presented, and I did vote against it. In talking to other communities, I've heard from other chambers and small businesses that, and we've gotten letters attesting to the same thing, that the tax-free days can be their highest income day of the year, which surprises me, but I will accept that happens, and I'm sure it's a psychological thing, but I think overall it's something that the businesses see as a positive. So I will be willing to vote in favor of it.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, that's why I asked about the timing on that, is because it doesn't seem like it's a high traffic time of year. And you may still have people out of town, even locals out of town, so I don't think it'd be that detrimental for us to consider it now instead of like during Mayfest.
Any other discussion?
We've asked in the past what the estimate of, and we never get an estimate of how much sales tax.
Well, and I can answer some things for you too. October, we saw lost sales tax revenue of approximately $12,783. $100. So, and also I wanted to put out there that we're ahead in our sales tax revenue by approximately $250,000 this year, ahead of budget. So,
well, can I speak to Assemblywoman Nancy's concerns? When I came last spring to bring this before the Assembly, and I don't have it on me, I took the amount of the sales tax revenue that was lost and I reversed it into how much money was spent that day in our community. And I don't have a calculator and I'm not a mathematician, but I can tell you it's a lot more than $12,000. October, for myself personally, I've been in business 5 years. It was the highest single day of sales I've had in 5 years. And I can give you a couple of reasons for that if you'd like. One was it was the morning of the breast cancer awareness walk. People were already out and about. Number two, PFDs had come in. That. In my shop, in addition to the 6%, I offered 20%. So, I mean, there are reasons, and as retailers, we're not just trying to ride along on the back of the borough. We're trying to take this opportunity that we've been given and make the most of it for us and our businesses, and for the local people as well, to kind of get them boosted. And and I don't know if you were out in October at all, but it was like a street fair downtown. There were balloons and there were kids and there were people everywhere, and it was just a really fun community event, with no specific cause. Well, I guess we're the cause. The other thing I wanted to I lost my thought. Oh, well. Does that help at all?
Yes, it
Nancy?
does.
Okay. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Motion passes for a tax-free day on May 3rd. Moving on to the approval of change order number 2 for the landfill slope stabilization project. Public Works and P&D Engineers is recommending approval of change order number 2. Rock and Road Construction has approved of this change, and the change will result in a lump sum contract value of $546,000, which is a reduction of $46,559.94 from the previous project value. And I'll need a motion.
So move to adopt.
Second.
Kurt moved and Jay seconded to adopt the approval of the change order. Is there any discussion?
It's good we're saving money.
This might be for Steve. Steve, do you understand the reduction for that project? Is it because they've changed the scope of the project, or they've come up with different?
Well, originally, we had, Carl, and correct me if I get this backwards, we were on a time and materials basis, so they were billing us for actual time. This is a flat rate, so it goes down, but you had the risk of the time and materials could have come in even less. Unfortunately, what we were seeing with all of the issues we had with the North Harbor dredge materials, that the chance of that happening was not great. So Carl renegotiated this as a flat rate rather than a time and materials bid.
Yeah.
Did I get that mostly right, Carl?
That's pretty close, yeah. Close enough.
I'd just like to say thanks, Carl, for looking after us.
Is there any further discussion? If not, will the clerk call the roll?
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
and Jay.
Yes.
And the approval of change order number 2 for the landfill slope stabilization project passes. Moving on to authorization to send letter to SEPA requesting consideration of the reduction of the wholesale electric rate. During the review of the electric department budget and in consideration of the recommendations made in the 2013 electric revenue study, the Assembly requested a letter be drafted asking SEPA to consider reducing the wholesale power rate to member communities versus issuing annual rebates. And the reason for this is to assist in planning budgets ahead of time instead of having to accommodate at the end.
Yeah, and to not have such a yo-yo and changing budgets. Yeah. I would so move that to send the letter that's proposed.
I'll second it.
Bob Lynn moves and Kurt Wallhuter seconds to send a letter to SEPA requesting that they consider a wholesale power reduction rate rather than issuing annual rebates. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
and Jay.
Yes.
And the motion passes. Moving on to communications. Are there any communications to report? The next agenda item is Assembly discussion items. 14-110, Assembly Review and Comment to the Borough's draft RFP for a comprehensive plan update. An updated comprehensive plan could address items such as waterfront development, municipal land selections, housing, the visitor industry, quality of life issues, new zoning districts, and development of a harbor master plan. And did you want to speak to that at all, Steve?
May I?
Sure.
We've talked about this at times. This will be paid for, hopefully, out of the Borough Transition Funds, which is a one-time state grant of approximately $600,000 to fund what we call, borough transition issues, the process of changing between a city to a borough. What we wanted to accomplish is we want to redo our comprehensive plan. Has not been updated in a lot of years. We want to add a harbor development plan to the mix, and we'd like to find a consultant to do this for us, is kind of help us through the process. To do this properly involves a tremendous number of public meetings, getting people's input, as well as evaluation of our existing comprehensive plan, which includes zoning and land use. We heard some issues earlier. The challenge is making sure that the RFP is what you want. And I'm speaking to the borough, P&Z. We've gone through several rewrites of this. I've monkeyed with it a little bit in times and places, and we're getting closer. But I wanted the assembly to have the opportunity to read it, make observations, make changes if need be, and then would be seeking your approval at the second meeting in April to basically approve this so that we can get it out and advertised and start looking for a consultant to make these decisions. I did include, in my original email, some questions about, an evaluation committee. If you haven't seen that, I can resend it to everybody. But it's, a group of people from different parts of the community that would actually evaluate whoever the consultant is that bids on this, as well as be the kind of the driving force on making sure the consultant is doing what we want them to do and focusing on those things that we want them to be focusing on. So, very important process. It's the very early stages, and it starts with making sure this document is asking for the right things.
And is it on the web?
This is not at this point. We can make that happen.
If the public wanted to weigh in.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
I've heard some ideas for different things to happen in the borough, and it'd be nice to make that available.
We can do that.
I've heard the same thing. But I have two questions for you, Steve. When I read that, one of the questions is what, on the particular items that you have in there, is how detailed do we want that as a part of the comprehensive plan? There's particularly a couple of them, like the harbor, and some of those. What kind of detail are you thinking, or are you thinking to evaluate that as part of the RFP, and or are you thinking about laying it out in here? Then the second question I piggyback on is, of all those items you have in there, if that comes in, let's say $500,000, and it has to be pared back, what would be your priorities?
Okay. You can really break this into two different projects almost. Harbor Development Plan and the Comprehensive Plan. One of the big negatives of our existing comprehensive plan is, for whatever reason, it didn't address the harbor, which is our main economic driver, and the comp plan really didn't go into, in my opinion, enough depth. So we really want that to happen. So if we had to basically deal with a comp plan that was just cursory looked at, but that we got a harbor development plan at it, my recommendation would be that should be the number one priority. Okay, that being said, what do I want out of a harbor development plan, first of all? This involves land use. Does the borough, and I mean this in a very broad sense, want to set aside land and say this is for commercial marine activity? Sounds really simple. Sure we do. Now do you want to enforce it? Meaning, when somebody opens up a donut shop in a piece of property that the Assembly and the P&Z Board has set aside as marine development, are you going to say, no, you can't open up, even though the property might have been vacant for 10 years? See what I mean? It becomes some very, very tough questions, and we want to understand not only what they recommend and what the community wants, but are we willing to enforce these things down the road? It's a big part of it. Harbor development is also an issue of what are the infrastructure needs we have today versus the future, and that does not necessarily include just Service Area 1. When you talk about Papke's and the state dock at Kupernoff and entrance, some of these DOT things, do they factor into this? Should they factor into this? That's a big part of the conversations that should occur. What's the my fiscal side comes out. What's the infrastructure impacts of the harbor infrastructure that we have today, and how do we afford to keep it nice so that when it wears out, that we have the money set aside to replace it? I mean, that's a big piece of this issue, particularly related to the waterfront and the harbor. I've heard, since I've been here, I mean, the issue that the Assembly just dealt with on this commercial property and gear storage, this isn't going to go away. And a good land use harbor development plan will deal with some of that, which is we've got a shortage of X type of property. Where should we put it? So, I'm talking all around your question and trying to hit it as much, but if I had to say the top priority of the comp plan, it's going to be land use, with the harbor being right above that, from a harbor infrastructure development plan and taking a hard look. What do we have today that we may not need? What do we not have that we're going to need? What's the future? I don't have all my harbor folks here right now, but what's the trend in boats? Kurt can probably tell us, but from what I've heard, it's bigger boats. So we're going to have to take that into account as we redesign harbors and facilities. Everything from size of the mooring slips to electrical needs, which affects power and light and so on. The other issues on here are nice to haves. I believe we have an affordable housing issue here. So having that analyzed and discussed, again, a comp plan is not going to solve anything. What it does is point out the pros and cons and where you're weak and what you might be able to do about it. We've talked about quality of life issues. We heard a lot about that today. I mean, community is not just about the budget, it's about the quality things that make it important, why people want to live here, libraries and museums and flower baskets on Main Street. Quality of life is something a comp plan will actually deal with in some sense. Because when they talk to people, what are important to people? Is it low taxes, or is it making sure that we've got, snow removal done faster? I mean, just examples. So, honestly, I have no idea what this is going to cost. I mean, until we put it out for bid and start to get the stuff back, we just don't know.
I just have two suggestions. One, I think we need to put some priority of the items. There's some really good ideas, really good thoughts in there. Don't disagree with that at all. Just where we want to put our emphasis. And my second one is, I think Cindy said the same thing, is I'd really like to see it put up on our website so people can comment before we go forward, because I'd like to hear what people have to say about it.
The web is easy and priority is mostly easy. I can put what's running through my mind as far as a priority, but I can't speak for everybody else.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other comments on that? Yeah, okay.
And the next item up, you may also get to speak on. It is the transfer of 3 marine facilities from the state to the borough, and those facilities are Papke's Landing, Kupernoff Dock, and Entrance Island of Dock.
I can speak in general, just kind of past, but I think this is Assemblymember Lynn's item that he wanted on here.
Go for it.
At this point in time, I can give you what we've heard from DOT. It goes back to a meeting that the mayor and I had in Juneau with Mike Lushkin, who's I'm not sure his official title, but he handles what ports and harbors remain in the state's control, of which these 3 facilities are within the borough boundaries and are on his list. The state at this point in time, and this is based on just Mike Lushkin talking to us, wants those facilities, he wants to give them to the borough. We do not have a formal offer letter from DOT at this point. That will come. There was some concern about sending the letter from their perspective until the borough boundaries were settled in court. So now that Juneau has appealed this to the Supreme Court, I'm not sure how that will affect DOT. We will try to find out. But his statement was, it's an all or nothing thing. You take all 3, period, with some amount of deferred maintenance dollars, or you get none. Okay. I'm not sure his word is law, but we're going to take it at that for the moment. Eventually, we'll get a letter from them making some kind of an offer, and with a dollar amount attached to it that says this is how much deferred maintenance. We've heard, he threw around a number of about $3 million. $3 million will not fix those 3 facilities, so that's an issue. If the borough, when it gets to that point, chooses to accept these facilities or deny them, I'm sure DOT will come along with a, accept them or else. I'm not sure what the or else is. I suppose they could take the facilities out, or they really can't stop doing maintenance, because I don't believe they're doing maintenance now. So,
Well said.
okay. Papke's in particular is an interesting one because it's 3 different state agencies that are involved. DOT is just the dock, the ramp is DNR, and the uplands is all mental health. So any discussion about that facility will involve some fairly complex negotiations. I mean, I believe the borough could probably choose in the land selection process the DNR portion. DOT has been pretty willing. They would love to get rid of it. Mental health wants to sell us the uplands sell the borough for $200,000 or $300,000. So, you have a lot of moving parts. I don't have a letter from DOT as of yet, although we're going to follow back up now that at least the initial borough decision went in our favor, and we'll see if we'll actually get a letter when that comes. Then I get to punt, which is hand it off to the assembly and ask you guys to make some really tough decisions.
Well, based on that, I'd like to weigh in if I could. I have familiarity with all 3 of them from a professional standpoint. Papke's Landing on the Mental Health Trust transferred in 2010 the parking lot to DNR. So the parking lot area and the ramp is owned by DNR, but the upland, as you say, is up above. I've got a couple concerns here. One is Kupernoff Dock was and is supported primarily by Kupernoff, and I really believe that when we get into discussions of Kupernoff Dock, we need to have a representative involved from Kupernoff. And I really think as an assembly we need to send them a letter asking them asking the council to, provide, or no, I shouldn't say provide is not the right word, but designate somebody that we could work with, 1. 2, the one up on Entrance Island, I've been there, I don't know if Kurt's tied up there or not, but that thing is in very bad shape, and I think you'd agree with me. My concern there is the liability associated with it. And now I'll go back to to Papke's. If you thought that the harbor here was in bad shape, go to Papke's Dock. And that's one that if we decide to take it over, that there's a tremendous liability, and it's used a lot in the summertime. That road that went down there was in the 1930s. It's on the Bureau of Land Management. Was designated in the 1930s as actually the way they got the equipment in for the hydroelectric plant up there. And by the way, I didn't realize it, but an old timer out there just told me that I thought it was an outhouse, but it's a phone booth sitting right there at the landing. It was done for the 3 Cs in the 1930s there. So it's been there that particular area has been used by Petersburg. It was a telephone booth to call back into Petersburg when the boats come back in. So But I'd like to see one other thing, is I'd like to see both Carl and Glo make a back-of-the-envelope estimate of what it's going to cost to do that, so we have something that we can use to go back and to work with and make some decisions of what we want to take or don't want to take or how we want to go about it. But I'd like to see a back-of-an-envelope estimate of what it's going to cost to fix that. The dock is the one that's going to be the major one. The ramp can wait, but the dock is in pretty bad shape on there, really bad shape. Last summer, it humped right in the middle of it, and they came back in, the state came back in, they put a couple boards in between it, and they took the hump out, and I mean, it's really in pretty bad shape there. Anyhow, with that, and the other thing I'd like to see is that I would like to see the public's comments on those three facilities, what they think we ought to do, particularly the one at Entrance Island. You know, I don't have any idea how much it's used or whether, and so forth, but it's one that, you know, I would ask that question if we were here trying to debate on what to do with it. But I'd really like to hear people's comments on it. If we could put that up and ask for comments, I would appreciate it, Steve.
Is the one at Entrance just boats, or is it float planes as well?
Just boats.
It's been a long time since I've been there.
I can tell you when we met with Mike, the mayor, who's been there as well, said, we don't want this, you know, we'd love to say no and make the state responsible for tearing it out. Then Mike Leshkin promptly said, well, you realize that, and Jody might be able to add to this, that Gold Belt is doing quite a bit of work in Hobart Bay there. And that if DOT gave us the float, they would actually also give us some land to go with it. They hadn't drawn that out yet on Entrance Island. And that, you know, there might actually be some value in that facility being nice, although I don't know who to necessarily. So he showed us a quick map and you know, talked about development. When we were doing the assessments, Jody continues to get, I'm not going to call them building permits, but building notifications, because these folks don't have to give us building permits, of Gold Belt building facilities there in Hobart Bay. So it ended up not being as simple a statement as what we previously thought, which was the thing sinking, please state, will you keep it and tear it out? Now suddenly, maybe it's not quite so simple. That being said, I don't know that it's overly used by anybody but the person who has a lodge or a cabin
An
actually
agricultural
on.
permit. And that was my next question. I thought that was Forest Service land, because Forest Service does have, that's an agricultural permit is my recollection, because I inspected that in a previous life and was out there a number of years ago.
So it's, and you know, to your Kupernoff question, we've got in our records, and I can't remember the exact date, but it's in like 2009, 2010, so it's not that long ago. The state did offer Kupernoff that dock, and Kupernoff turned them down, said no. So, again, a lot of moving parts. I wasn't here at that point, and there's awful good reasons to tell the state no if they would have offered no deferred maintenance, for example. We don't really in the know as far as why Kupernoff said no to the state at that time.
Yeah, I just believe they need to be involved in the decision on that.
We did ask that because I agree with you. I've heard talk that that's an issue that folks on Kupernoff take very strongly. Mike Leshkin with DOT was very clear to us, which is they are not going to give it to the city of Kupernoff, period. They will deal with the borough and, period. So, again, he's not the decision maker. He's important, but we don't know yet. We don't know yet.
To include Kupernoff as the only city in the borough. Yeah. We need to include Kupernoff in the discussion.
Yeah. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Sure. Moving on to recognitions. Is there anyone that has a recognition?
I have here written recognition here that I'd like to read to you if you'll bear with me. And this is to Amber Burrell and with a copy to Jody. Through February, Amber and Jody spent a considerable amount of time to finish and mail property evaluations. At times, I was not sure that they'd meet the deadlines, but they finished and mailed them on or before the date. After those assessments were mailed, I received many questions and comments. Throughout the month of March, I referred somewhere between 30 and 40 property owners to Amber. During that period, I brought to Amber's and Arnie's attention some major questions in valuation consistency that property owners had brought to my attention, and I could not explain. I was very impressed with the timeliness, thoroughness, and responsiveness in which these questions were handled. I saw no defensiveness on their part, rather a desire to get it right. There were massive changes made that in most instances were in the favor of the property owner. To date, I have had 6 individuals contact me specifically to compliment Amber. Allow me a minute to paraphrase some of the comments. One individual told me that of all the government workers they had encountered over the years, Amber is the most responsive and sincere. Another related that they had called Amber for a copy of their assessment worksheet. They said their smartphone beeped about 15 minutes later, and there it was. They related how impressed they were with the responsiveness. 2 individuals told me they were very unhappy because their assessments did not relate to any land that they owned. Both said they were highly impressed with Amber, who sorted out the problems and worked to a solution. One person told me if they were running a business, they'd be trying to hire Amber away from the borough. 2 of those individuals specifically asked me if I would compliment and commend Amber at an assembly meeting. Amber, I want to personally thank you for all the hard work and dedication over the past month. I've come to greatly respect your abilities, and please let me know if you want to apply for the Assistant State Assessor's position. I'd gladly write a recommendation. Thank you.
Very nice.
Yeah, well done.
I'm sure that's been a challenging time for everybody too, and especially the borough staff and added workload. Are there any other recognitions?
Just Diane.
We do have one on our agenda, and that is congratulations to Diane Murph. Diane earned the Girl Scouts prestigious Gold Award, and in recognition of Diane's achievement, Mayor Jensen provided a certificate of merit, which was included in our packet. And I don't think it has any additional. It says, unfortunately, on an iPad, if I flip my iPad to see it, it will continue to flip the document, so bear with me. It says, for your dedication and commitment to serving your community and others through scouting, congratulations on receiving the Girl Scout Gold Award. Congratulations to Diane. And at this point in the meeting, we will close our public meeting and start our executive session. Take a motion. We need a motion.
Motion in a second.
Then we need a motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we move to executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
The assembly's been 5.